Hello and welcome back to our opening research series. This DVD is going to be a bit different from all the other DVDs we're going to do in this series, and I will explain you why. It's known in a theory that openings that were very popular several years ago, now forgotten because they did not have very good outcome, good results, and that's why one or the other side stopped playing it. Same thing with this opening that practically carries my name. Well, that's how in most of the books it's known as a Dzindzi Indian. And nobody was supportive to this opening. I'm talking about c4, g6, knight c3, c5, d5, bishop takes c3, bc. Nobody was supportive to this opening more than I was. There were a lot of followers, a lot of grandmasters. Currently deceased Igor Ivanov, even one of the top players in the world, Morozevich, was playing it quite successfully. But then some games came up that kind of shattered the image of Dzindzi Indian. And now, with the help of high-powered analysis and much closer and different approach to it, I have to announce that the opening is back and fully on its feet, and you can play it. Well, if I was playing in active tournaments today, I would have played it, and I would have played, and I think you should too. There are quite a bit of upsides and downsides of this playing this opening. Now this is going to be kind of a lengthy introduction to this opening because I want you to fully understand why we play this opening rather than Nimzo Indian or King's Indian or Slav or Grunfeld. Well, of course, this opening is not better than the other openings, but when you play something new, and this opening has a lot of very healthy positional ideas. It was just not doing well because when white was opening the game, but it has some very good and healthy ideas. As long as you don't get crushed, you're going to get positions that are more familiar to you, better known to you than to opponent. Strategy and maneuvering here is rather different than in the other openings. Those are the upsides. Some other upsides, I want to finish with upsides first. Some other upsides is that there is, with Ripka's help, some different ideas, some new ideas obviously found, and kind of innovative approach to it, and that also helps us to bring this opening to life. And not that I paid a lot of attention to statistics of this opening, result statistics, because statistics are overwhelmingly in black's favor. But again, this opening wasn't played on the highest possible level, and I assume I was a little critical too, and that's why I didn't pay to this too much attention. But look from the bright side. You are not going to be playing this against best players in the world as well, because if you are on that level, you already have yourself very good established opening repertoire. So as far as comparing for someone, some average player, playing this opening versus any others, there is no downside as far as getting bad positions or something like that. So those are the arguments. Now, those are the arguments, those are the upsides. The downside of it, I think it's the only downside. Actually, took up a couple of downsides. One of them, white doesn't have to allow Dzindzi Indian. For example, d4, g6, c4, bishop g7. First of all, on the second move, they can go e4. But if they want to go e4, they may be more likely to start with e4. But of course, this is possibility, and which you have a choice to play kind of Indian type of defense or transpose to d6, modern, or transpose to maybe regular King's Indian. You have all these options. We cannot cover all those options on this DVD because we're going to cover Dzindzi Indian. But what the main options after d4, g6, c4, bishop g7, if white wants to play d4 opening without allowing black to play bishop takes c3 after c5, actually in this position black is already doing okay. I have to point that if white goes knight f3, then we play cd, knight takes d4, knight c6. We're going to cover these options in anti-Dzindzi Indian DVD that will be coming out at the same time as this one. But the main down side of it, that white may play e4 and does not allow Dzindzi Indian. But then we also have very interesting material for you. This is one downside. If you can call it downside, it's not really a downside, it's just another variety of the opening. The other downside that with a perfect play for white, with absolutely perfect play for white, they have small advantage, the type of advantage white is normally entitled to in any reasonable solid opening they get. They are not going to get more of an advantage than they usually get in some other sound opening. So after d4, g6, c4, bishop g7, knight c3, c5, d5, that's the topic of our discussion. Our discussion starts with this position. I have to tell you, if you asked me, why would black give dark square bishop? Black would give dark square bishop for two reasons. One of them, to keep position closed, to create some weaknesses on white's queen side, and secondly, to get position closed where knights may be better than bishops. So, f5 is necessary move. There was queen a5 tried, there was d6 tried, but you cannot allow white go e4, because then bishop takes c3 will make no sense. Of course, after f5, white still can go e4, and I think it's the best option, but that's going to lead in different type of positions. Okay, after f5, there are a lot of different moves for white. I faced h4 here. I faced knight f3, g4. But a good thing here, if the absolute best move is e4. Moves like h4, g4, knight f3, they did not have success. And actually, nothing has changed in the evaluation of those positions. The absolute best move, and the move which made me abandon this opening and search and stop playing it, you kind of forget about it, was e4, fe, and f3. This is the absolute best move order, but before we get to it, I want to tell you, in this position, no matter what else is played, black has fairly good game. I'm going to cover, after covering the main variation, some of the side variations with quick overview on the plans and ideas. But right now, I want to go with e4 move. Fe is the best answer, and f3. Taking this pawn is very dangerous because it sets black too far down in development, behind in development, and position is very dangerous. We don't want to go on through this. It's just not the position you want to play. And here comes the main reason why I abandoned Dzindzi Indian. Because of queen a5, queen c2 was played almost every time. Now, rather than show you why this is not so good, and it is not, because after ef, actually black's move knight f6, fe, d6, knight f3, knight d7, bishop e2, knight g4. This was played many times, but position is not good for black. And rather than go on with this position that is not very good for black, and why we abandoned playing this opening, I'll show you a different idea that brought this opening, well, in my eyes at least, and I believe this idea will bring, if didn't yet, this opening back to life. e4, fe, f3, d6. Now, I was always thinking that queen a5 was the main idea behind this opening. But with Rivka's help and detailed analysis, I came to conclusion, well, actually, Rivka came, and I agree 100%, that after d6, black is okay. The best answer, fe, knight f6. Those are the best moves for black. Queen c2, knight d7, knight f3. All moves are very natural. Knight g4 and bishop e2. Now, this is the critical position which and based on which we're going to bring this opening into circulation again. This is the main position, and here are some secrets of this position. As you can see, black's problem is the weakness on the king side, weakness of dark squares. However, they have potential e5 square for one of the knights. The best move for black, the castling, and now let's see white's options. If white castles, which looks the most natural, and in big majority of the cases, that's the move you should expect. However, it's not the most ambitious and the best move. Now, after knight d to e5, black simply goes, after castle, black goes knight d to e5, and white can go bishop g5, then we can play knight f7. You see, black kind of controls their own weak squares, and after bishop d2, simply bishop d7. Plan is very simple, to put one of the knights on e5, and it's very, very difficult for white to get anything going on the king side. On the other hand, black may try to go e6, queen e7, and I think position is very close to equal, although Rivka thinks white has a very slight edge. But Rivka thinks white has a very slight edge almost always when one side has bishop pair. Black has no real weaknesses after king g7 especially, and black's position is very playable. Now, let's look at most ambitious continuation, and maybe the best continuation for white, the h3 move. That, of course, forces us to go with knight on e5. Then after bishop g5, bishop h6, we should not play knight takes f3 here. That's the danger of the position. Do not play. In some cases, this structure is okay for black. Not in this case. After rook f7, f4, black is not doing well. Knight f6 can be met with f5, and I would not recommend to play this position. However, so what we should do in this position, simply go rook to f7. Do not be afraid of knight g5. We're going to go rook f6. Knight may go to e6, which looks very dangerous, but it's not. Queen a5 will totally neutralize temporary initiative by white. Well, we simply want to go knight f7, kick this bishop away, and then go knight e5, after which knight on e6 will be under attack. And if white tries to play bishop g5, then we're going to go rook f7, followed by knight f6, getting rid of this knight. And I want you to realize that once this knight is exchanged, once pieces will start coming off the board. And at this point, nothing bad will happen to black. This knight on e5, centralized knight on e5, potential weaknesses of white's pawn structure may pay off for black. So this is not a very dangerous position for white, for black, not dangerous at all. Now getting this back to this position, and the best continuations, the absolute best for white here is, it's kind of unexpected continuation, and it's, I would doubt that any average player, if he played 20 or 30 games with it against another average to reasonably good player, I don't think you're going to get it even once. Anyone for white will play once unless they watch this DVD. And here is the best move is h3. As I already mentioned, we have to play knight e5, and the best move now is highly unexpected h4. Now this is not something you will see, and it has no logic. However, h4 has to play in this precise moment where now white has some advantage of point 2. There are possible continuations, knight f6. I played and suggested with Rivka h5 continuations. In all these cases, black is a slightly worse, but with a very lively and playable position. Knight f6 may be met with knight takes e5, d takes e and h5. And again, even if position the opens here, black has quite good chances of defending, and as I already mentioned, position is very, very playable. And actually this is not what we just looked at. It's not much material but it's new material. And this move order and this variation basically what killed this opening for several years. Now I think this opening is back. And if we are covering this opening, again, starting with position after bishop takes c3, if we are covering this opening without best way to play for white, which is e4 followed by f3, if we are covering, we should cover it in full. Let me explain why moves like knight f3, bishop f4, or h4, or even g4 was played. Why they are not such a good move, such a good ideas, and not such a good moves. Okay, first approach, if white does not try to open center in early stage of the game, and if they try to be very conservative. Well, let's see, knight f3. Being conservative for white is probably, not probably, it is very bad idea. Now we go queen a5. Assuming queen c2, knight f6, and now white has choices. Choices about their development. Bishop may go to f4 or g5, and I think we should treat it equally in both cases. On bishop f4, you have choice of going knight e4, followed by d6 and knight d7. Or you can go d6 right away, because this pawn structure is perfectly okay for black, with the idea of bringing knight in the center. Now we completely covered the reason why we did not play this opening and why I personally abandoned this opening for years. And why I want to bring it back to life, because of what we just saw. But if you play this opening and you get this position, most of the time on the lower to average level, you're going to see moves like knight f3, h4, oh, I don't know, maybe even bishop f4, moves that are not the best, and how to deal with it. Since white is not under pressure here, they may try various different ways to develop. Most natural developing move, non-aggressive, is knight f3. Then we will go queen a5 and suppose queen c2. This position is already very, very good for black. In fact, I wouldn't want to play this position for white. Black simply wants to develop knight f6 and so on. Well, actually, maybe we should go knight f6 or d6. If white plays e3, we're going to go knight f6, bishop e2 or bishop d3, it doesn't matter, knight d7, and when white castles, knight e5, giving black very, very good game. Black has very good game because if white takes the knight on e5, I want you to understand that this position, this pawn structure, is very favorable for black. And the main reason why it is so, because white has two bishops and white has no chance at all to activate either one of them. e4 will be met to with f4, and vice versa, f4 will be met with e4. White's bishops are doomed. So this position is not good for white. Now suppose white tries to play differently and develop a little unorthodox way. You know, f5 move is typical for Dutch defense and Dutch opening, and very frequently white plays their knight h3 to get the f4 square for knight, assuming black will go d6. Yes, black will go d6 here, knight f6 and knight f4 d6. The problem is that e6 square is not accessible for white's knight. But even if it was knight d7, knight e6, knight e5, it's absolutely meaningless and pointless to put the knight on e6. Black is doing very well again. So if we abandon this plays for white, and white does not play e4, and e4, as I mentioned already, is the best continuation, there is another aggressive way to play for white, to go h4 and h5, to try to open the h file quickly. It may be done right away, h4, or e4 fe h4. This idea is not good in both cases. In both cases, black has very good defense against it. And here is the defense. Let's look at first at e4 fe h4. What I would suggest, we could simply go queen a5, and after h5, here we have to make a good move. I'm not big fan of queen takes c3 move, bishop d2, and give potentials for white to put the bishop on c3. So I'm not. I don't want to take the c3 pawn. On the other hand, gh, queen takes h5, is bad for black. For one reason, because on king d8, white wins after queen e5 move, and now knight f6, d6. Nevertheless, position is very, very good for black. What black should do in this position is simply go d6. And after h takes g, h takes g. Rook takes h8, queen c3 check, followed by capturing rook on h8. White does not have, after queen d2, queen h8, and bishop b2, white does not have sufficient compensation for 2 pawns. Black will develop quickly, knight f6, knight d7. The position is real bad for white. Now, if h4 played immediately in this position, then we can go queen a5, and after h5, d6, as we already mentioned. And if queen c2, we can simply take on h5, and on rook takes h5, knight f6, continue with knight d7 and knight e5. This is one way to play for black. And the other way was more popular and also good after h4. What black did was queen a5, queen c2. They simply played knight f6, and after h5, rook g8. This is acceptable, very acceptable as well. But you can pick either one of them, because they are both so good that it doesn't really make much difference which way you play. Remember, what you're trying to do, trying to get position closed. And if position opens, make sure you are prepared for it. And your piece is properly developed and ready for opening of the position. Once more, let's get to the start position of the opening. And let's see what else can be done here with white to open position. Now, for a long time was very popular g4 move. It's since black doesn't have dark square bishop, they try to quickly get big advantage in the center, but it's not that easy. After f takes g, h3. This was played. What we should do here, we should not take on h3, and we should not let white take on g4, because that will give white too many open files on the king side. g3 is the correct move, and black is doing very, very well here. Now, if f takes g, point. Now, I want to point here that this position, this is an absolutely ridiculous way to play for white, because they have the same pawn structure as if they played e4, fe, f3, and later they take. That's about the same pawn structure, with the exception that pawn is on e2, and they have pawns on h3 and g3. So this makes no sense. But people that play this for white, they came up with the idea of getting total control in its center by playing f4 and e4. This is simply bad for white. Queen a5, or queen c2, or bishop d2, it doesn't make difference. Knight f6. Now e4 can be and will be met by knight takes e4, and after bishop g2 or knight f3, black simply protects the pawn on g3, and white's strategy is all in ruins. f4 is going to be weak after castling, maybe. Also, black can go knight d7, knight f6, and castle queenside. g4 idea is not good idea, and nobody played it in a long time. It was, at first, it was introduced g4, f, gh3 as very, very aggressive continuations, but after g3, shortly after g3, g4 idea has died, and nobody has played it after. Now, let me give you quick overview of this position. This is the start position. Quick overview is such. White does not have any advantage at all whatsoever after any move besides e4, fe, f3. This is absolute best continuation for white. And with our innovative play d6, knight f6, without queen a5, and with absolute best play for white, which is, remember, this is very important, highly improbable for anyone except for the highest level playing it for you, against you. And even if they do, it's very, very difficult for white. It's a lot more difficult for white than for black to follow the idea precisely. But even if all this happens, I can guarantee you that white is not going to get more than small advantage, like 0.2 advantage maybe. So if you know what it means on computer engine language, you will realize that it's not much. Black has very, very playable game, and this opening has a right to be on the list of competitive openings, most competitive openings of d4. Now, as much I was disappointed with this opening for black and I stopped playing it, just as much I recommend you to get back and start playing it. I'm not playing in competitive tournaments, but if I was, believe me, I would take very serious approach to playing this opening on any level. So now that we covered that, I want you to see positional plays in very instructive games played with these openings. I played many times, but so is some very good players. I will tell you, I'm going to show you games of above average players played with white, and you see how time after time they were getting bad positions. And amazingly, the most amazed me is statistics. It's a highly blacks, very highly favorable for blacks, and in black has tremendous score. So let's look at some games. This game was played on the master's level. G4, F takes G, E4, Queen A5, Queen C2, D6. And H3 was played. You see, after G3, with the transposition, we got the game where I said that's not a good idea to play. White has very good center, but pawn on G3 alive, and the position is not good for white. After knight E2, knight H5, bishop G2, knight D7. This position is already, white pawn structure is ruined on king side and queen side. They have strong center, but they don't have pieces that can actively participate in its center. In my opinion, this position is almost lost for white. So what happened after castling? Black immediately went on attacking C4 pawn, and after queen D3, queen A4, you see that C4 pawn cannot be supported anymore. Knight takes G3, knight takes, queen takes, and now black played bishop D7, which is a good move. C4 pawn is not going anywhere. F5, G takes F, and E5. It looks like white got what they wanted, but after knight takes C4, E takes D was played. Probably best try was E6, and after bishop D5, queen G7. But even then, black simply castles, and after queen takes E7 and rook G8, they have very powerful attack. So white didn't play it, and what happened in the game, after E5, knight takes C4, E takes D, E takes D, and bishop G5. King F7, queen H4, H5. Black shortly won the game. Black could have played, safer this, but basically it proved that the idea with G4, FG, E4 is not a good option for white. Now, a game I want to show you was played between two relatively strong masters. Well, you see, I'm showing you games not really on a very weak level. H4 was played. It's not really a passive opening, but after queen A5, queen D3 was played. The reason why I say it was passively played with black, it's more I'm referring to position that we'll get in a few moves. After knight F6, now white did not continue with H5. They played simply knight F3, D6, bishop G5, knight BD7, knight D2. See, they are trying to go E4 at some point. Knight E5, and after knight E5, queen C2, bishop D7. This position, you can see here that black resolved all their problems. You cannot see black having problems on king side. They are ready to castle queen side. White has weaknesses, and it's unclear where white's king home is going to be after h4 move. After queen c2, bishop d7 was played, and now a4. Black simply castled, and after h5, now if knight takes, then e7 pawn is hanging. Black played knight f7, bishop takes f6, ef. This position is already a solid advantage for black. Black has beautiful pawn structure, open e-file, and better king, and the head in development. g3, knight e5, king d1. Well, king d1, that indicates that white doesn't want to castle king side because they are not safe, because h-file may be open or black may take after white castles king side. And on the other hand, they don't want to put bishop on g2 in case black decides to attack the c pawn. So king d5 is kind of waiting move, rook d to e8, bishop h3, king c7, rook a3. Well, I want to tell you here, when you see white making moves like this is, based on my experiences, clear indication that they are very confused. They don't know what to do. They're practically screaming for help. And black went b5, which is okay. Absolutely not necessary, but it's okay move. Black could have played rook g8, then rook g7, and rook e7 to double rooks on e-file. You can also play rook e7 since bishop is on h3, and hg is not a threat. Well, but b5 is a very aggressive approach. C takes b, bishop takes b5. I'm not saying b5 is bad. I'm saying it's not necessary, but very aggressive. Rook e1, knight c4, and I think now white is simply lost. What was played again? Knight takes c4, bishop takes c4, bishop g2, rook e5. Black has everything. They have development, they have better coordination, they have better pawn structure, they have attack, and they are about to win the d pawn. And it's totally lost for white. King c1, queen a6, bishop f3, rook h to e8, hg, and white lost quickly. There is no point of continue looking at this game because we see clear outcome of the opening. And every time you play this opening, white is under a lot of pressure. And the pressure, they start practically with damaged pawn structure, and they are practically forced to do something real quick, or they're gonna face problem with their pawn structure, and they will be completely outplayed on pawn weaknesses. So this is a good example, and every time we play, that's why most of the players, if you ask the 100 100 top players in the world, would they like to play a position after bishop takes c3 for white? No, they will not, even though it's known that e4, fe, f3 gives advantage, and big advantage before, big advantage to white. According to the last analysis, they know the analyses are not stable, and we proved it. They are not very credible. We proved it. Now, we brought back this opening to life. They wouldn't like to play this position, and that's why most of them try to avoid to go around it and try not to play against this opening. And luckily for them, they do have an option. Let's look at a couple of more very instructive games. Here is a highly instructional game played in Europe between two masters. d4, g6, c4, bishop g7, knight c3, c5, d5, bishop takes c3, b takes c, and f5, knight f3 variation. Well, I mentioned already several times, knight f3, very harmless move, and white cannot afford to make harmless moves because they have positional pawn structure damage. They have to act very actively. After knight f3, queen a5, queen d3, knight f6. You know, I was very amazed. I never paid attention, even though I practically invented this opening. I was amazed, and I never thought knight f3 was a good move. I was amazed when I looked at the statistics of not whole Dzindzi Indian, but specifically knight f3. Black won with astronomical score, like they won like with 6-to-1 ratio. So this really shows how difficult it is to play for white against this opening. So now let's go on with knight f6, e3, d6, bishop e2, knight d7, castle, and black played knight b6. Well, let's talk about this position. Knight b6 is not a bad move. And the reason why knight b6 is not a bad move, I normally don't like to put knight on the edge of the board, but there is no way white can open the center. And it may be okay to put the knight on b6, especially it was very poorly played by white, this game. But what I prefer, and I like very much, knight e5 move. I already explained this in our theoretical part of this opening, that this pawn structure after d takes c is very good for black. White has two bishops and they have no chance to bring either one of them to game. A move like d6 with a desperate attempt to open position, black can respond simply bishop e6, and after d takes e, king takes e7 with practically winning position because of the pawn damages on c4, c3. And if if white doesn't play d6. There is no good advice here for white. Black, I've had this position several times, this type of positions. What happened in the game, I won bishop d7, then I castled, then I put my knight to d6, and eventually white was totally helpless. They didn't know what to do with bishops. That's a really bad position, and that's the reason I like knight e5 move. Knight b6 was played, knight b6 was played, however. Now after bishop d1, bishop d7, knight d2, black castled long. Well, here it's okay to castle short too, but castling long is very good too. Knight b3, queen a6, here is the target. Now, since white hasn't done anything, we go on and attack the c4 pawn. And you cannot defend with knight d2 because when black has simple tactical shot because queen is not defended. Bishop e2 was played, and you see black is going back, white is going back and forth without any hope of getting active position. Now black could have done e5, that they play d6, which is also a very good move. D takes e, bishop takes e6, and position, it looks very, very grim for white. c4 pawn is terrible. Knight d2, king b8. Here is e4. Well, sometimes desperate situation requires desperate measures. White desperately is trying to get some breathing space for their pieces. Of course, knight takes e4 will be met by bishop takes c4. So in this position, white played queen e3, rook h to e8. White is totally lost. Queen f4, knight h5, bishop takes h5, pawn takes h5, knight takes e4, bishop takes c4, and rook e1. This is total triumph of black's strategy. King a8 now, intending to go d5, getting out of the pin. After king a8, there is not much hope for white. They are down a pawn in a bad position. Bishop e3, knight d5, queen g5, queen a5, more pawns hanging, knight f6, rook e5, queen g7, knight takes c3, king h5, knight b5. Black has number of extra pawns, a4, knight d4, and beautifully placed pieces. After rook eb1, actually we can stop right here, but there are few more moves were made. Knight f5, queen h7, knight takes e3, fe, rook takes e3, and black won in a couple of moves after that. h3, rook e1 check, rook takes e1, queen takes e1, queen e5, attacking king, knight, rook. That was inevitable, and white resigned here. Very good, instructive game. with a very logical result. Firstly, when I was developing this opening, I had the general idea of playing against those weaknesses and to stay away from opening position in early stage. I had a lot of followers, some strong, very strong players, some mediocre players, masters, and they kept playing this opening. And as they played, they added some more and more interesting idea. It's how they found an exception to some general rules I have said, and actually they were very creative and very, very helpful in developing this opening. This is a very good example of it. Well, in this position, white played bishop f4, d6, knight f3, knight f6, e3, queen a5, and I tell you what was black's idea: queen c2, knight d7, bishop d3. This is an interesting idea. Now, white wants to play e4, not right away, maybe after castling. Black cannot play knight e5, black cannot play knight e4. What would black do here? Very interesting idea by very strong master playing with black here. Totally different from any idea you may have in this opening, but very powerful one. After b5, the idea is very clear: to take on c4, play knight b6, bishop b7, and d5 pawn is going to be very defenseless. Very nice move, b5, pawn takes, knight takes d5. That's using not such a great position of bishop on f4, not because we want to take it, but it stops e4 in a number of cases. Pawn on c3 hanging, so rook to c1. Bishop b7, bishop g3. Now white wants to go e4. Knight 5 to b6. And since white cannot go e4 now, we want to go c4 and play bishop e4 maybe. So white played bishop e2. So black continued a6. Now b5 pawn is hanging. Pawn takes. Bishop takes a6. Black has huge positional advantage. You see, main disadvantage of black's pawn structure is weaknesses on king, black squares on king side. You can feel it. Black can freely castle on a queen side. Meanwhile, they have a very good pawn structure, and white has weakness on a2, and black has big advantage. Bishop takes a6, queen takes a6, stopping castle, rook a1, castling, knight d2. White is positionally lost. Rook f to b8, c4. Well, another option was knight to c4 here, and after queen b3, knight b6. But this is not a bad idea. Rook f to b8, c4, queen a4. If queens are exchanged, pawn on a4 is folding, pawn on a2, pawn on c4 is very weak. So queen d3 is forced, queen a3, king e2, queen takes d3. This is absolute disaster for white. Rook a3 check, king c2, rook a4. One weakness, two weakness, and terrible bishop on g3, totally out of play. King c3, rook b to a8, and after a3, black simply won a pawn. Rook takes a3, rook takes a3, and rook takes a3, king b2, rook a4. You know, player with black is a good player, but it's not like a world's top player. You see how easy it, he just used basic strategies, and he got absolutely winning position thanks to b5 ideas. And there are so many innovative ideas for black, white, black. Some people found in this opening all different kinds of idea. And one of these players is Ripka, that came up against the most dangerous line, which I showed in beginning of the DVD, which actually brought whole opening back into the game. And we don't need to continue. This is more like a technical part. We don't need to continue on with this game. Black has an extra pawn, and most of the time I don't like to continue when one side gets winning position, because if that side, if guy with the winning position didn't win the game, it does not indicate on the value of the opening, and it served the purpose. We saw how black totally outplayed white right after the opening. Now, this game was played against national master, our American master, Danny Shapiro. He's a good player, but however, he failed to manage this game properly, and he played this poorly. But I'm going to show you some common mistakes made in this game. d4, g6, c4, bishop g7, knight c3, c5, d5, bishop takes c3, bc, and f5. After h3 move, I went queen a5. h3 move is not a good move. White realizes, actually any good player would realize, that you cannot let black simply develop the pieces and without opening position. So he plays h3, preparing g4. But if after g4 black doesn't take on g4, then h3 looks like waste of time, which it is. So what happened after h3? Queen a5, queen d3, d6, g4, knight f6. Now g takes f will be faced with bishop takes f5, so bishop g2, but bishop doesn't stand well on this diagonal. So after bishop g2, knight bd7, knight is heading to e5. Natural reaction for black to stop it, f4. But then knight goes to b6, where black has an idea to win the c4 pawn. White already is in a lot of trouble. I think white may be lost here. Knight f3, knight e4, knight g5, knight takes g5, f takes g, f takes g, h takes g, and here I played bishop takes g4, and the idea not to win a pawn, but to have an outpost on f5 in the future, or maybe even h5. White castled. White has two bishops, and they are both very passive, and obviously they are totally lost. Castling long, bishop h3, bishop takes h3, queen takes h3, king b8, rook f7. Now, this position is completely hopeless because knight is better than the bishop. White has multiple weaknesses and a weak king. This is big enough advantage for any average player, beat anybody at all. Queen a4, rook takes e7, queen takes c4, attacking d5, and after e4, queen e2. That's a good move, threatening queen d1 check and also threatening knight takes d5 because e pawn is pinned. White's rook will be hanging. Bishop f4 was played, and after knight takes d5, the game is practically over. White made another desperate attempt, kind of agony. King takes b7, e takes d, king a8, c4, rook hf8, and after queen g3, simply queen e4. That wins more material. Attacking the bishop, actually rook f1 is the only move, then queen takes c4 because the threat is rook takes f4, on bishop e3, rook f3, and if bishop goes anywhere else, also queen d4 check, winning the rook. This is very simple game, and there was practically no effort from black. It's just very poor management by white, and white was kind of confused in this game and got quickly very bad and lost position. Here is the example of how white tried to improvise with a pawn structure to take most of the squares in its center away from black. And let's see what came out of it. e3, queen a5, e3 by itself is indication that bishop on c1 will be bad. Bishop d2, d6, bishop d3, knight f6, knight e2, knight bd7, all pretty standard moves, and now f4. Now, that's not a bad move, but it has some good and bad sides you can look from. So f4 is a good move because we'll never allow knight on e5. On the other hand, it deprives white from playing e4. White's going to have very hard time making e4 ever, and also gives black a chance to go knight e4. And in fact, knight e4 now might have been pretty good option for black. If bishop takes, pawn takes, and on knight g3, knight f6, and after queen c2, even bishop f5. You see, the more we lock position, the worse white bishop on d2 is going to be. This is pretty bad position. That's what I would consider seriously playing, is knight e4 move. The option is not bad. Knight b6, castle, and now queen a4, attacking c4 pawn, queen takes a4, and knight takes a4. This pawn structure for white, we know it's not good. When queens are exchanged, it becomes a lot worse. Now rook a b1 must be played, otherwise there is a big threat of knight b2 attacking bishop and winning c pawn. Rook a b1, knight b6, bishop c1. There is no good advice for black. Bishop d7 and knight g3. Then castle for black. Rook f2, rook h to e8, rook f to b2. It's doubling rook against the wall. King c7, h3, rook b8. That's not necessary move. e6 could have been played already. Rook b8, e4, pawn takes, knight takes. You see, in this position, black wants to go e6, and after de, bishop takes e6. And eventually all white's pawns are doomed. So white didn't want to wait for it. They give a pawn, they're going to lose anyway. F takes e, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, knight takes c4. Now black has an extra pawn for absolutely zero compensation. Actually, they have positional advantage as well. After rook f5, now bishop f5, rook e2, bishop f5 could have been played. That gives dominating position for knight on c4. That wasn't played, but black nevertheless won the game. And this is also very instructive. You see how many cases when we play this game, unless white creates very powerful pressure or attack, if game goes long and in maneuvering, their pawn structure has big dent in it, and most of the time it ends up bad. So this opening, when you play, Dzindzi Indian has very good positional ideas. It's not, besides being, very solid opening, I want to tell you that that's the way to learn about positional maneuvering. I said that when I was recommending to play Hubner variation in Dzindzi Indian. Well, some similar ideas, but completely different standing in the center. And white has big difficulties taking advantage of black's dark square weaknesses on a king side. Well, let me put it this way. If the pawn was on b3, I would say this is terrible position for black, and it is, because there is the bishop. But if bishop doesn't get on this long diagonal, bishop cannot find good place on the king side, not for long. So white must be very active and must open the center quick, which, as we have seen, is not that simple. Only one move order provides these changes. And playing with that, we found the best response for black, and we're getting pretty close to equality, or actually it's some advantage for white with very good defensive resources for black. I am very much recommending to play this opening, not so much as, well, first of all, it's a good opening, and secondly, it's very instructive for your positional knowledge. So play this opening, play Dzindzi Indian, and I'm not recommending because it's named after me, because it has very good positional ideas. Thank you very much, and play Dzindzi.